Okay, hi. I'm just going to ask you a few questions. If you're uncomfortable with any of the questions, just say pass. Okay, so what is your full name and age?
My full name is Vivian JoAn Post, and I am 83.
I'm Boyd Wallace Post, and I'm 84.
All right. And were you an immigrant or a natural born citizen?
Natural born citizen.
Both natural born citizens.
Okay. Were your parents immigrants? If so, where were they from?
No, the most I know about my parents
Cool.
was that my mother was born on the farm where my grandmother lived. And
They're
where I
long-term.
I spent a lot of time on the farm because it was close. We had our own house in Duncan Falls, but my mother would take me up to hoe and weed and milk cows and stuff like that.
And both of our families are long-term residents, Americans. My family came over from England in the 1600s,
Oh, wow.
so we've been here for a while.
Okay. What is your favorite childhood memory and why? Please elaborate if you can.
Oh my goodness. I may have to think about that one. Do you have a favorite childhood memory that you can spout off off the top of your head?
Yes, when I bought my first canoe, I was 16 years old, and I had an electric train that I'd been given as a Christmas present. And I'd kind of outgrown the train, but I really wanted a canoe. And I found an old canoe that was available, and the guy would take an electric train and trade for the canoe, and I was in heaven.
Oh.
And he's loved canoes ever since. And we have one out there beside the hedge. I'm still working on my favorite one. Could I come back to
Yeah.
that if one comes to me?
Yeah, we can come back to that. Where did you grow up? What was it like living there? Was segregation prevalent where you lived?
Mhm.
Interesting. I grew up in Duncan Falls, Ohio. Very small town, 10 miles south of Zanesville, Ohio, if you've ever heard of Zanesville. Anyhow, Duncan Falls was a very small town, and I loved being there because you knew a lot of people. It was not like you were in a big city like Philadelphia or New York. And what was the second part of the question?
Segregation.
Oh,
Yeah.
segregation. No, we had one black young man in our high school, just one. So, and nobody, it was like he was just there. It's very quiet. I suppose his parents told him to be quiet. Don't be quiet. I don't know. Anyway, he was a nice guy, but I don't know what happened to him after he graduated from high school.
Well, the town that I grew up in is Corning, Ohio. And in those days, the town was segregated. There was not to be any Negro person in the community after sundown. However, the school was integrated. There were black students in the high school all the way through. So it was a mixed situation as far as segregation is concerned.
Okay, interesting. Have you ever met anyone famous or interesting? If so, who?
Hmm.
How about when you opened the highway?
Oh.
It's your claim to fame.
I have one tiny little claim to fame. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, this little town of Duncan Falls had a paved street, but then at the end of the town, it stopped, and so they decided at one point that they wanted to extend the paving down to a town called Marietta, which was on the Ohio River. And so they paved the street, and then they had to open it officially with one of those ribbons where you cut the ribbon. And because the doctor in our little town of Duncan Falls knew my mother and father quite well, and my brother and me, except my brother hadn't been born yet. But at 4 years old, they asked me, or my mother said, she didn't ask, she told me that she was going to get me a little Indian girl outfit because they wanted the kids to dress up like Indians. So I had a little Indian girl outfit, and the other kid that worked, that was did the same thing. He was a boy a little bit older than I was, and he had an Indian outfit with feathers that went down his back.
Oh my
He was
gosh.
his father was the doctor who was in charge of this civic event.
The community leader. in
He
other
was the
words.
committee leader. And so the governor of Ohio at that time, whose last name was White, so he was Governor White. That's all I know about him. And he was very, very nice to me, and kind of thought I was a cute little kid and was behaving myself. It wasn't that. Well, I didn't have any temper tantrums or anything like that. So I cut the ribbon with help, to open the highway down to Marietta. And it was in the paper, so.
And let's see, I'll have to fast forward way into my career with the Department of Agriculture. I had an opportunity to represent the United States at an international forestry research meeting in Germany, where forestry was first started. But I don't remember what year that was, but anyway, I was the U.S. representative, and we were asked to plant a tree in memory of the U.S. participation.
Mhm.
Have 100 years.
Yeah. So that was a big event.
Cool.
Foresters there from all over the world.
Wow. Okay, were you involved in any wars, or was anyone you loved involved in any wars?
I had some relatives that were my grandmother's brothers were involved in World War I. The first one, during the 1900s. And one of them died, but not in the army. He was in the army, but he got
Got flu, didn't
he got a flu, and it was one of those
he? Had
really
a nasty flu epidemic.
and he died in a camp in Michigan.
Oh.
So it wasn't like he died on the battlefield. His name was Colin Perkins. That's the only one. Oh, I know somebody that was in the Korean War.
I spent 3 years during the Korean War in the Air Force. 1 year of it in Tripoli, Libya, of all places.
Yeah, we had it.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
And I got to take her for 6 months.
Mhm.
So it was an extended honeymoon. in
Yeah,
that
it was right
So,
soon after we had come.
If all wars could have been that easy, it would have been nice. Didn't get into combat, nowhere close.
It's probably a good thing.
Yeah, a
Very
very good,
happy
very
about it.
good thing. Combat is not pleasant.
But that was very beneficial in that that 3 years in the Air Force entitled me to 4 years of college education. I already had a bachelor's degree, and I stretched that 4 years to a master's and a doctorate program. And it worked very well for us and for the country.
Where did you go to school?
I got my undergraduate degree at Ohio University
In Athens.
in Athens, Ohio, and then a doctorate and master's at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina.
Very cool.
Do you have any inklings of what you want to do when you graduate?
Oh, this isn't about me. This is about you.
Oh, I'm just curious. Okay, what's the next one?
I don't know.
Where did
so.
you go to school? At a school near Cleveland called Baldwin Wallace, or did you mean, the high school was in Philo across the river from Duncan Falls. But
Yeah.
then I went to college in Berea, Ohio, up near Cleveland, and it was called Baldwin Wallace College.
Very cool.
and I got a degree in education.
Elementary education.
Elementary education, yeah. And taught school for a while after that.
Do you have any interesting stories about teaching school?
Yeah, I do. I was first of all given a first grade class, which, you know, they were cute as could be, but some of them were not very well disciplined, and I had one little boy who just absolutely refused to do what I wanted him to do, and so I told him to go outside in the hall and close the door. Well, in trying to close the door, he was stubborn, so he put his foot inside so the door wouldn't close. So I thought, he's going to be a salesman someday. Do what I want you to do. No, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I had twins one time, and they were young, and in an art project, I asked them to draw something that they enjoyed doing. And since they were twins, they drew the same thing, and they drew themselves in a swimming pool. And but they were stick figures, so you couldn't really really tell what they were doing. But I thought it was interesting that they didn't separate the twins like they do a lot of times now. Now they want the kids to be, you know, sort of independent and not depend on the other one. And so many schools will separate them, but not where I was teaching. I taught in a town in Ohio called Elyria, to start out with.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
What is the greatest injustice you have ever witnessed?
Actually witnessed, actually saw it.
Yeah, or it could be something you heard about, if something you saw.
Well, I was pretty upset about the cruelty to the people who were really caring about the injustice in the South, when people were being hanged and, you know, and put in jail for no good reason, whatever, but
Segregation.
segregation problems. I was very upset about that, and never had experienced it in my hometown, because this one black kid was a very nice kid. And going to college, we had a lot of nice black people there, and there was no unrest at all. Of course, that's Cleveland, and Cleveland has a lot of different nationalities. They have a lot of people from the Caucasus, the Slavic kind of people. They have a lot of, they just kind of, you know, settle in one place, and they say, "This is a great country, come on over," and then somebody, some other people look. So yeah, it was that kind of thing that I was very, very happy when they passed the law that schools were going to be integrated, even though Corning was ahead of them. His school was already integrated, and I just think that a lot has happened. Now we have a black president. I just think it's wonderful.
All right, what about you?
Well, I was involved in trying to get black students to be admitted to Duke University. They had a segregation policy while I was a grad student there. And so I was passing a petition among students and faculty trying to get students admitted that were of color. And we were successful.
That's good, that's
It
cool.
worked out all right.
All right, tell your favorite story about your spouse.
This guy right here?
Yeah.
Martha's heard this one. You want to hear it again? This is how we met. Let's see, it's summertime now, and I'm, and let's see.
You're working at the Mosaic Tile.
Yeah, I was working at the Mosaic Tile Company, which my Aunt Mabel was also. She got me the job, and I was a file clerk. I would file papers in a certain area. And she took me to work with her. And a friend of mine from high school, whose name was Virginia, just like the state that we're in. And she spent most of the time driving from our little town of Duncan Falls up to Zanesville, where the Mosaic Tile Company was. And she spent most of that time bragging about her new boyfriend. And he was a lifeguard at the local lake, I guess, a lake. We had a Cutler Lake out in what was the whole forest called?
Blue Rock State Forest.
Blue Rock State Forest. And I got so sick of hearing her talk about this perfect man who was the lifeguard and how handsome he was and how blah blah blah. You know, you get really tired of that after a while. And so one day I said to her, Virginia, I think you're making some of this up because no guy could be that perfect. Well, why don't you come and meet him, she said. That was her big mistake. So what she took me, she had a car, and so she drove me out one night after we had been to work all day, and we took our bathing suits, and she said, I'll introduce you, because he's right there on the dock. He didn't have a chair like they do at pools. He had to stand up and watch all the little children swimming in the pool. And I'm sure he was doing a good job. Had his arms folded like this, and he's, head is swiveling around, keeping track of how many kids, when they go under the water, he wanted to be sure they came back up. So we got our bathing suits on, and we went down on the dock, but he still didn't turn around. And Virginia May, her second name was Virginia May, she tapped him on the shoulder and she said, Boyd, I want you to meet a friend of mine. And he turned around briefly, just briefly, because he's always been a person who, he has a job, he wants to do it perfectly. So, but I wasn't considering that. I was considering my feelings. You see, I was kind of selfish. He said, glad to meet you. That's all he said to me. I thought, well, that's not very friendly. So I thought, oh. And then I teased him about something else. I said, you're so dry. Can you really swim?
Can you swim? Yeah.
And he said, of course I can swim. I have a license from the Red Cross to be this lifeguard. I'm like, dummy, don't you know these things? And so I decided, well, I'm going to test how his swimming is. So I ran off the end of the dock, and I had just finished a semester of swimming lessons in college. And so I could, dog paddle before that, but I actually knew how to swim. So I ran off the edge of the dock and went under the water, came back up and did the hell thing. And he couldn't, since he hadn't asked me if I could swim, he had to get in the water and save me. And so then after that, it happened that he had a friend who was a student at University of Chicago, and that friend came home on a vacation and asked him if there was any girl that would go out with him, and we could go out on a double date. Virginia with Boyd and me with his friend whose name was Leon. And so Leon and I and Boyd and Virginia went to a lot of movies, and during the month of July we were there. It was August when you went.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we went to a lot of movies, and I was more attracted to what they were talking about. They were talking about, Leon was a big political guy, and so he would talk a lot about politics. And at the time I was a Republican, and he was he a Republican?
He was a Democrat.
He was a Democrat, yeah.
Dyed in the wool.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought I was going to say that, but then I wanted to be sure I was right. So anyhow, I was able to join in to some of their conversations and listen, and Virginia never was a very vocal person. except when we drove in, I never heard her say much, and except when we drove in the car and she was bragging about her wonderful boyfriend.
Mhm.
I said that one time, and they've been teasing me about it ever since. So at one point I told somebody, Virginia just wasn't college material. And now I feel bad about that. Anyway, then first part of August, Virginia and I went out to the lake again.
End of August.
The end of August? I thought it was at the beginning. Okay. Well, it was you who went. Anyhow, his draft notice was coming up because, he can explain that too, because the Korean War had started, and they needed new men in the services. So anyhow, she said, we noticed that he wasn't there. There was a substitute lifeguard, and we said, where's Boyd? And he said, oh, he joined the Air Force. So now you can finish the story.
Well, rather than going into the Army under the draft, I decided to enlist in the Air Force because I'd had some meteorology courses while I was doing my undergraduate work. And so I got into the Air Force, enlisted, and by the end of the week that I had enlisted, I was on my way to a basic training camp down in Texas. And after that, we carried out some correspondence by
A daily
friendly
letter.
young lady sending her service friend
Yeah, I want.
mail from home.
There was something in those days about them saying, pay attention to the people that are serving this country. Write a little note, tell them you're grateful that they're that they're giving their time and energy. And so I thought, okay, I'll write to my servicemen. The only one I knew was him, so I wrote to him and told him what was going on. And that was my senior year in college. So when I was free, I would write him a letter almost every day, didn't I?
You got into that.
Yeah.
So we had a 2-year correspondence, and then we were married.
Mm-hmm.
I like the story though about how Virginia May came down with her family for Thanksgiving.
Oh, well, that's another story.
You can tell that one too if you want to.
Well,
Yeah.
Virginia May was
Pushy.
she wanted to get married more than anything else, I think. And she wasn't really interested in what was going on in the world and anything other than her personal life. And that didn't impress me a whole lot. So I was more attracted to JoAn because she was interested in what's going on in the world in politics and was interested in educating young people and a lot of good points.
Yeah, I scored.
So we found that we had a lot of mutual interests, and I got some leave at Christmas time, came back, and we had our first date together.
He asked me to a snowball dance in
Somerset.
Somerset, Ohio, which is the town where, who's the,
Phil Sheridan.
Phil Sheridan
General
of
Phil Sheridan.
of Civil War fame, grew up in that town,
Somerset.
Somerset.
So that was the beginning.
Did you have a separate story that you wanted to?
No, that's good.
You can share anything you want to.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. Talk about your children. How many did you have, and how fun or hard were they to raise? Talk about your grandchildren too. Feel free to brag.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's see. We have 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. And Boyd liked to joke and say that we got the 2 girls first so that they could babysit for the 2 boys that came along What was that, Mark?
Didn't work well. You had us too far apart.
Yeah, well, that's true. Becky got the.
It was a
the
joke.
run. Yeah, let's see. The children were actually very easy to raise. They were, I get not any problem with any of them, except for their health, because the first thing that happened that was not a good thing is that the youngest one, Charlie, who now lives in Richmond, or close to Richmond, he came down with juvenile diabetes, and which involved him learning how to give his own shot and how to eat correctly. And of course, he liked everything that little boys like, candy and, you know, the things
Cake
that aren't.
and sodas. And
Yeah, sodas. and-
anything that had sugar in it.
Mhm. And so that had to be watched
So
carefully.
we also had some trauma with Martha walking into a moving car when she was 2 years
Oh,
old,
I'd forgotten about that.
which
She didn't, nothing,
really caused us a lot of
we were frightened by that. And what had happened was, that was when we were living in Burlington, Vermont. We were living in a apartment house that had 3 stories to it. And we had a visitor friend who was coming up to visit us, and she had left her, I guess, suitcase in her car. And so Boyd and
excuse me.
who went down to get the suitcase?
The visitor went down.
Oh, okay, and Martha followed her, and she was.
Oh, we didn't know that.
Martha was only, when were you, Martha? 2 or
2.
3? 2 years old.
I don't remember.
I know you don't.
Anyhow, she,
We went down all those 3 flights of stairs
yeah.
as a 2-year-old, down backwards, if you will.
Oh my
And
gosh.
started to follow this lady. She had parked across the street,
Mhm.
and
And she wasn't looking at cars.
there
She
was a car parked there, and
She was.
the person that was visiting had walked across not knowing that Martha was following her. And this car was coming up the street, not very fast, thank goodness. And Martha just walked out from in front of this car where they couldn't see her at all, and got bumped on the
Oh.
forehead. And spent a few days in the hospital.
Oh, I thought only one.
I thought it was one night too.
I thought it was a couple of days anyways.
Seemed long, but I think it was only one night.
Caused
But
us a lot of concern.
Yeah, we were really worried about it, but.
She bounced back.
She's bounced back very nicely.
Knocked some sense in.
Anyway, they were normal childhood things, but probably the worst was the diabetes for our youngest at 9.
Yeah, he
And
was
that's-
9 years old.
It's very difficult to deal with.
And he didn't want to be, he didn't want to be diabetic, of course, you know, he wanted to be
Yeah.
normal, like all his other friends, and so he would constantly say, I hate this, I'm gonna, he would threaten, that he might as well be dead, you know, and that always makes you
Yeah.
clutch up. But he's okay now, and he's married, and he's
He was taking care of himself finally.
taking care of himself, and he has a pump, one of those insulin pumps, where all he has to do is, he has to fill it up with insulin, and then it's put someplace in where you can't see it, and it ejects the insulin
Okay,
at certain points.
all right.
Okay. Have you ever broken the law? If so, were you caught, and what was your punishment? Did you think it was fair?
Well, I remember traveling by myself in one of our cars, I don't remember which car it was, to meet him at Baldwin Wallace. I think I was going there for a reunion, and he was going to meet me because he was flying in from someplace, and there's an airport in Berea, Ohio. so that he was gonna fly into the airport, and I was gonna pick him up at the airport, and I was going too fast. And I wasn't, it was before texting, because I wasn't texting. I was just driving too fast. And I was stopped and given a fine for speeding. And, no, it was fair. I paid the fine, and I didn't go to jail, and I didn't hurt anybody else, and so. Did you ever have anything like that?
Nope. Never broken the law.
Okay, that's a good thing. What is your favorite holiday story? Like with family or?
I think the combination of Christmases at the farm, where her grandmother lived and eventually her parents lived there until they died. During the Christmas holidays in particular, the whole family would gather there, and it was just a lot of fun. Around the table at mealtime, there was always a lot of conversation, a lot of joking, and it was, and also great food.
Yeah.
Real farm food, and they did their own bread baking and pies. And, they always had
Noodles?
eggs that were produced on the farm. They had meat from the farm and so on. It was just a good family.
Mhm.
Great.
Mhm. That would be my feeling too, Christmases and any other get-togethers that we have. There's a picture right there of us, our family, which is the two adult girls and their sons and daughters. We have one granddaughter, that's Martha's daughter, and 3 grandsons.
Grandsons, yeah.
Yeah, so. But family gatherings are just very pleasant. And I bet you your family has the same thing.
Yeah.
Family events are great. And let's see, scouting. Oh yeah. All 3 of our grandsons are Eagle Scouts.
Yeah, we're very proud of that.
Cool.
And that'll be like when you get this, isn't that, is that the top? Are you working on the top?
Yeah, yeah.
You're working
I'm
for
a
the gold
cadet,
award.
so I'm working towards the gold award.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So see, that your family will be very proud of you.
Thank you. And last question. So I know it's a lot. The last one is, what other interesting stories do you have?
Huh.
Do you have anything you want to share that you would want recorded? So.
Hmm.
Well, I think our early marriage days, actually I got sent overseas very shortly after we were married in 1952. And we got to travel to Tripoli, Libya, very early in our marriage. And from base at Tripoli, we actually had a week just before we came back in 1953 where we could go to the island of Malta up toward Italy in the middle of the Mediterranean and visit some ancient stone buildings that had been created 5,000 years ago. And
Wow.
it created a love of travel
Mhm.
that's still with us.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, we've been to Egypt and India
China,
and China and,
Russia,
yeah, a little bit of Russia.
Finland.
Finland.
Cool.
We've traveled a lot and enjoyed it all. And it's very educational.
we're thinking of Greece. Would you suggest a place?
Yeah, I've been to Greece. It's very nice.
Where did you go?
I've been to Athens, which is very nice, but it's crowded. It's a big city. And then Corfu is a little island off of Greece, and that's really nice too.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have any solid plans for Greece, but it's in the back of our minds. We
In our
like to do-
bucket list.
Yeah.
It's in our.
Alright.
Do you got anything else that you wanna?
No, I guess I've been in scouting almost all my life. I got my eagle in 1946.
Oh, cool.
Pretty much on his own, like, just choosing his own project and, without, so you've done some of that too.
Yeah.
This is something you've.
So scouting can be a lifetime thing.
Mhm. Well, if there's nothing else you'd like to add, I'd like to thank you for participating.